The morning sun filtered through the pine trees like golden honey, casting long shadows across the forest floor. Sarah Running Bear moved silently through the woods, her moccasins barely disturbing the carpet of fallen needles. At 19, she had learned the old ways from her grandmother. The art of reading the land, of listening to what the earth was trying to tell her. She paused, head tilted. Something was wrong. The birds had stopped singing in this part of the forest, and there was a strange heaviness in the air. Her grandmother had taught her to trust these feelings. Following an instinct she couldn't name, Sarah made her way toward a small clearing where the trees thinned. What she found there made her heart skip. A mound of freshly turned earth. Too neat to be natural, too purposeful to be anything but a grave. But as she knelt beside it, pressing her ear to the ground as her grandmother had taught her, she heard something that chilled her blood, a faint tapping, rhythmic, desperate. Someone was buried alive. Without hesitation, Sarah began to dig. Her hands moved quickly through the loose soil, her heart pounding with each passing moment. She had no tools, only her hands and a fierce determination that surprised even her. Hold on, she whispered to the earth. Hold on, whoever you are. The tapping grew stronger as she dug deeper. Then, suddenly, her fingers touched something hard. Wood, a coffin lid. She cleared away more dirt. Working frantically now, the tapping had stopped, and that terrified her more than anything. With all her strength, she pried at the wooden lid, until it splintered and gave way. Inside, barely conscious, lay a man she recognized immediately. Thomas Whitmore, the cattle baron, who owned most of the land around these parts. His face was pale as winter snow, his breathing shallow and labored. Mr. Whitmore, she said gently, helping him sit up. Easy now, you're safe. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused and confused. When they finally settled on her face, she saw something she'd never seen in a white man's eyes when looking at her before. Not fear, not suspicion, not anger, just ... gratitude. Pure, overwhelming gratitude. Sarah helped him out of the makeshift grave, supporting his weight as he struggled to stand. His legs were weak, and he trembled like a newborn calf. Double quotes. Who, ... double quotes, he whispered, his voice barely audible. Who did this to you? Thomas looked at her for a long moment, as if deciding whether to trust her with the truth. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with shame. My own son, he said quietly. My own boy, Marcus. He found out about the will, about what I had planned to do with the land when I'm gone. Sarah said nothing, but she listened. Her grandmother had taught her that sometimes the greatest gift you could give someone was simply to hear their story. I was going to give most of it back, Thomas continued, his voice growing stronger. To your people, to make things right for what my father did when he first came here. Marcus couldn't understand. Said I'd gone soft in my old age. The words hung in the air between them like morning mist. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. This man, this cattle baron who had been seen as an enemy of her people, had been willing to give back what was never truly his to begin with. Can you walk? She asked gently. Thomas nodded, though she could see the effort it took him. I think so. But Sarah ... That's your name, isn't it? Sarah Running Bear? She nodded, surprised he knew her name. I've heard about you. Your grandmother was Margaret. Running Bear. She was. She was a good woman, helped my wife when she was dying, sat with her for 3 days when the fever took her. Sarah's heart tightened. She remembered her grandmother speaking of a white woman she had helped, but she had never connected it to the Whitmore family. My grandmother said all people deserve dignity in their passing, Sarah said softly. She said death makes us all equal. Thomas smiled then, a real smile that reached his eyes. She was right. And life should make us equal too. As they made their way slowly through the forest, Thomas, leaning heavily on Sarah's arm, he told her more of his story. How he had spent the last years of his life trying to undo the damage his father had done. How he had fought with his son about the future of the land. How Marcus had finally snapped when he learned about the will. He didn't mean to kill me, Thomas said, his voice filled with a father's pain. He just He was so angry. When I fell and hit my head, he thought I was dead. He was trying to hide what he'd done. Sarah felt a deep sadness for this man who had lost so much: his wife, his son's respect, and nearly his life. But there was something else in his voice now, something that hadn't been there before. Peace. You know what's strange? Thomas said as they reached the edge of the forest. When I was in that box in the dark, I wasn't afraid. I was relieved, like I could finally let go of all the anger and guilt I'd been carrying. Sarah understood. Her grandmother had taught her that sometimes we had to lose everything to find what really mattered. At the edge of the forest, they could see the Whitmore Ranch in the distance. Thomas stopped walking and turned to face Sarah. I need to ask you something, he said, his voice serious. And I need you to tell me the truth. Do you think your people could ever forgive mine? Do you think there's hope for us to live together in peace? Sarah looked at this man who had been buried alive by his own son, who had lost everything he thought mattered, and who was still thinking about others. My grandmother used to tell me that the earth doesn't belong to us, she said, quietly. We belong to the earth. The land will be here long after we're gone. The question isn't whether we can share it. The question is whether we can remember that we're all just visitors here. Thomas nodded slowly. Your grandmother was a wise woman. She was, Sarah agreed. And she taught me that kindness is the only thing that really matters in the end. Not the land we own, not the money we have, not even the family we come from, just the kindness we show to each other. As they approached the ranch, Sarah could see people running toward them, ranch hands, neighbors, and among them, a young man she recognized as Marcus Whitmore. His face was a mask of shock and confusion. Son, Thomas called out, his voice carrying across the distance. We need to talk. Marcus stopped running and stood frozen, as if he were seeing a ghost. 6 Marcus stopped running and stood frozen, as if he were seeing a ghost. He's not a bad boy, Thomas said quietly to Sarah. He's just lost, like I was for so many years. Sarah watched as father and son faced each other across the dusty yard. She thought about her grandmother's words about forgiveness, about how it was sometimes the hardest thing to do, and the most important. Mr. Whitmore, she said softly, what will you do now? Thomas was quiet for a long moment, watching his son. I'm going to try to be the father I should have been all along, and I'm going to keep my promise about the land. Your people deserve to have their home back. Sarah felt tears slip down her cheeks. Thank you, No, Thomas said, turning to look at her with eyes full of gratitude. Thank you. You saved my life today. But more than that, you saved my soul. As Sarah watched Thomas walk toward his son, she thought about the strange turns life could take. This morning she had been just a young Apache woman walking through the forest. Now she was witness to something that felt like a miracle. The two men stood face to face for a long moment. Then Marcus fell to his knees, his shoulders shaking with sobs. Thomas knelt beside him, putting his arms around his son. I'm sorry, Pa, Marcus whispered. I'm so sorry, I know, son, Thomas said gently. I know. We both made mistakes, but we're still here. We still have time to make things right. Sarah turned to leave, feeling that this was a moment that belonged to them alone. But Thomas called after her. Sarah, will you come back? Will you help me? Help us? Figure out how to do this right. She looked back at the two men, at the ranch hands and neighbors gathered around them, at the land that stretched out in all directions under the endless sky. Yes, she said simply. I'll come back. As Sarah walked home through the forest, the late afternoon sun painting everything in shades of gold and amber, she thought about what her grandmother would have said about this day. She would have said that this was how the world was supposed to work. That kindness was like water, finding its way into the smallest cracks and bringing life to the most barren places. Sarah paused at the place where she had found the grave. Now just a hole in the earth surrounded by scattered soil. By tomorrow, the forest would begin to reclaim it. Grass would grow, leaves would fall, and eventually there would be no sign that anything had ever happened here. But the kindness that had passed between them today. that would last forever. Asterisk, she smiled, hearing her grandmother's voice in the wind through the trees. Every act of kindness creates a ripple, little one, and those ripples never truly stop. Asterisk, as Sarah continued home, she carried with her the memory of a man who had been willing to give back what was never truly his, and the knowledge that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply show up when someone needs help. Asterisk, the forest settled into evening quiet around her, and all was as it should be.